3 GMT, you're watching Al Jazeera. Iran has launched a wave of missiles towards Israel. Sirens have sounded across the country with projectiles seen over northern Israel. The military says it has intercepted all of the missiles so far, but there are reports now that further attacks could take place. Iran has warned that it'll respond with, quote, greater force if Israel retaliates. Shortly after the attacks launched, the spokesman from Iran's Central Command gave a video statement. Ibrahim Zolfagari said the attack was in response to the Israeli strike on Beirut's southern suburb of Dahiyeh. And he also accused the U.S. of giving Israel the green light.
Through its repeated violations of the ceasefire, the aggressive Zionist regime has continuously escalated its acts of aggression against the oppressed people of Lebanon. These actions have been carried out with the green light and support of the criminal United States and amid the silence of international community. By employing prohibited weapons, including phosphorus munitions, the regime has committed war crimes. Despite previous warnings issued by the Islamic Republic of Iran, the child-killing Zionist regime has crossed all red lines by intensifying its attacks in southern Lebanon and targeting Dahiyeh and the southern suburbs of Beirut. We had previously warned that if there were any crimes committed in Dahiyeh, we would strike within those occupied territories. The Zionist military must immediately cease its attacks against southern Lebanon and Dahiyeh. Should it expand its aggression in that area or respond to Iran's action, it will face even more forceful blows. In such a case, devastating operations will be launched against the regime and its supporters.
We have our correspondents standing by for us following all these latest developments. Journalist Abed Abu Shahadeh is in Jaffa in Israel. Jack Hewson is in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. Alan Fisher is live for us in Washington, D.C. First, though, let's head to Mohammed Val, who's live in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Mohammed, what are the Iranian leaders now saying about these latest strikes, and are the attacks over for now?
Well, it sounds like that's the case because there is a phrase in the statement by the IRGC saying that this is a shot, this is a warning shot to Israel, and that if Israel responds against Iran, then the next retaliation or the next phase of attack by Iran will be more devastating and more comprehensive. So that's clearly an indication that Iran is not intending to continue these missile strikes on Israel, and that it is a warning because Iran has been threatening to do this for a while now, including last week and also even before that, saying that if Israel continues to strike in Lebanon, and particularly on Beirut, then Iran will retaliate. So Iran is, even though it is bracing for a possible response, but the message there is that we have done our part. We have kept to our promise to the Lebanese people, and we have sent a strong message to Israel, and we are capable of sending a much stronger message if they continue. The dynamic that Iran wants to set, the new equation that it wants to set here in motion, is that it is no longer something just reciprocated between Iran and Israel, but it is something that has to do with Lebanon, that Israel has to stop its attacks on Lebanon. The problem now is whether Israel is going to do that or not. It is under pressure from the American side, and it is now under this kind of pressure from the Iranian side. If Israel does not respond to Iran but continues to strike in Lebanon, then the purpose of tonight's strikes from Iran will be void, and Iran will not be satisfied with that, and its allies in Lebanon also will not see this as anything consequential. If Israel stops its attacks in Lebanon, then this will be considered a great victory here in Iran, and Iran will consider it a step that can be built on for negotiations in Pakistan. They are still studying proposals from Washington, the latest, and they are talking about a response very soon. The foreign minister, Iranian foreign minister, has been speaking to his counterparts across the region and even beyond. So the Iranians have left the track of diplomacy open, aside from explaining what happened tonight to the on the diplomatic level. So they are waiting for those negotiations probably to resume. They are not expecting, or they are not desiring for an escalation that is going to be open-ended, but they say they are ready for it if it happens.
That's Al Jazeera's Mohammed Val reporting live from Tehran. Thank you, Mohammed. And President Trump has told the Financial Times about a phone call that he held with Israeli President not the president, he's the prime minister, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu. He reportedly said that he calls the shots and that Netanyahu will have no choice but to accept a deal with Iran. And he's also quoted as saying Iran's strikes have not changed his desire to conclude these negotiations. However, that if a deal wasn't reached, he would consider a commando raid on Iran. Let's bring in our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, who's live for us in Washington, D.C. Alan, those are the words coming from the Financial Times. What are you hearing about this phone call between Donald Trump and Netanyahu?
Well, it lasted somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, much shorter than the two have spent on the phone with each other in recent days. We are told from numerous sources that Donald Trump told Benjamin Netanyahu effectively to stand down. He said that the Israelis had had their attack, the Iranians had responded, and now they had to effectively stop because he wanted to get a deal done with the Iranians sometime in the next 2 or 3 days, and said a deal could be done on Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday. We know that Donald Trump has in the past spoken to the Israelis and talked to them about their operation in Lebanon. A few weeks ago, Donald Trump put out on social media that he'd forbidden the Israelis to attack the southern part of Lebanon. That had no impact. And then, of course, we were told that he had said that the Israelis were going to turn their troops back from the southern part of Lebanon because he had spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu. There was no sign again that that had any impact. So when Donald Trump makes these statements, it's clear that the Israelis may be given tacit agreement on the phone, but their operational procedures are much different. And again, the idea that Donald Trump could, in his words, call the shots and accept Benjamin Netanyahu, force Benjamin Netanyahu to accept any deal that is done with Iran, doesn't quite understand the politics in Israel, and particularly the opposition that Netanyahu would face if he was seen to be doing the United States bidding. In fact, one leading opposition leader has said in the last few hours that it would effectively reduce the idea of Israel not being a sovereign state to a mere satellite of the United States.
That's Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher reporting live from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for now, Alan. Let's bring in Osama bin Javed, who joins me here on the set in the studio here in Doha. Osama, you heard the words there from Alan. It does appear that Netanyahu says one thing, he tells one thing to Donald Trump on the phone, and then he does something else on the ground. I mean, talk to me about the mood between these two leaders when they speak on the phone. We know that Donald Trump used some really harsh words last time when they were speaking to each other.
Well, it appears that the United States is now setting the tone of this engagement because in Donald Trump's words that he says what needs to be done and they will have no other choice. Without the United States support, Israel would not have been able to launch any of these operations, whether it was Gaza, whether it was Lebanon, or now this war that you saw with Iran. So it appears that the United States, because the U.S. president wants to get out of this war at all costs, has had enough and wants an end to this. And obviously, this escalation by Israel of attacking Dahieh is seen by Iran as a red line, as the Iranians had been stating all along. It appears that, as you've been hearing from various sides, that the lines of diplomacy have not been closed, but Iran wanted to show Israel that it does have the military route open to it as well, although it appears that these strikes were much smaller in scale to what we saw during the war, and most of it, according to Israeli reporting, these missiles were shot down. So now, right after, what is interesting is that right after launching these strikes, there's a flurry of calls between Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, and the Pakistani mediators. He also calls the Qataris, he calls the Egyptians, he calls the French and the Brits as well, and also Turkey. So it appears that the Iranians are telling the world that they had to do this because this was a red line they'd stated all along. This is an option that is available to them, and they want to tell the world that they're also open for diplomacy. What does that mean in real world terms? Well, we've been here many a times before where the U.S. president has said that we're very close to a deal, but whether it transpires or not is an open-ended.
So let's dig into that a little bit further, because you're saying that Donald Trump says the path to diplomacy is open. Iran seems to be sending messages to Washington via the Pakistani mediators. At the same time, you've got Netanyahu knowing full well that the southern suburbs of Beirut is that red line for Iran. So why does he do that? Why does he strike southern Beirut when he knows that Iran will have to respond militarily? Is it an intentional attempt to sabotage these negotiations?
Well, according to the Israelis, this is essentially an act of self-defense where they see the opportunity to strike Hezbollah, as they've been claiming. And whenever they see this opportunity, they are going to strike at will, because Lebanon, all of Lebanon, according to Israeli military, is open to them. That is a red line to Iran. But there's a behavioral pattern. You've seen that when there were negotiations between Hamas and Israel, Israel essentially killed the leader of Hamas. When there was another round of negotiations, Israel attacked Qatar because it does not want a deal. And now you're seeing it again, an escalation of choice by Israel, enduring a war of choice by Israel, because looking at the history of what the Israeli Prime Minister has been saying for at least 2 decades is that Iran is closer to a bomb, and that was the pretext that he used to go to war with Iran. So it appears that Israel is going to continue on its trajectory to get its goals in its self-defense, in its national interest, regardless of whatever the United States or the region wants. You're seeing the frustration from Donald Trump, as you mentioned, the last phone calls where choice words were used by Donald Trump, who verified it in another interview that he did say those words. So it is coming to a point where you're seeing the Iranians now realize that unless they strike with force, they're not going to get the best answer out of Donald Trump. But that is also what the Israeli administration under Benjamin Netanyahu have realized as well. So now we'll have to wait and see how successful this latest phone call between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump has been, where he's asked them that you had your strike and now the Iranians have had their strikes. Let's all come back to the table, because this could go either 2 ways. Either this could start a chain reaction of escalation, or it could put impetus behind this very slow-moving dialogue, which according to all sides is still happening, but in terms of dividends, we haven't seen any.
I'm wondering if this chain reaction started already about a week ago, when you had Netanyahu striking southern Beirut, Donald Trump calling him, telling him to back off. A couple of days later, you had the ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel. But still, Israel kept on attacking, striking Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. And now tonight, you saw this escalation where Iran launched their missiles. Was this inevitable, what happened tonight?
Well, I think what you're seeing is what has been laid out, not just in the last few weeks, but go back to last year. If you look at the sea of mistrust that exists between the Americans and the Iranians and the Israelis, is because the Iranians would tell you they went to Oman to negotiate with the Americans and the Israelis. They came under attack. Then they went back to Geneva and they came under attack. They went into a ceasefire and their islands have been attacked, and Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. On the other side, the Iranians have also attacked various Gulf countries. They have not given up any support for any of their regional actors or proxies, as the U.S. likes to call them, and they're continuing with their chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. So it is maximalist positions on all sides, where what is suffering here is not just a two-sided conflict, but it is having a great impact economically, socially, on logistics of the entire world. And this region and the mediators are trying to push for this light at the end of the tunnel that Donald Trump every week shines a light on, but really hasn't been able to deliver. So it appears that this could go in that direction. We've been here before. We'll just have to wait and see when Donald Trump says that it could be Tuesday or Wednesday when there could be a deal that could be signed. Well, you know, that has been months in the making. And unless it happens, as in diplomacy, they say, unless everything is agreed upon, nothing is agreed upon.
And we still don't know, of course, how Israel is going to respond to these Iranian attacks. Osama bin Javed, thank you so much for now. Let's turn now to our guests.